If I asked you what your favorite Call of Duty is, chances are you'd say Call of Duty Java or Call of Duty on the N-Gage. Oh wait, my bad. It's probably the real-time strategy game exclusive to Australia. Or what about the Call of Duty Clash of Clans ripoff? I'm Ornery, and today we will be going through the Call of Duty spin-offs that you've never played. There are some decently popular ones on here, but we will also dive into ones that were completely swept under the rug. To be eligible, it had to have an actual release in some type of way, so cancel games will not be mentioned here. But if you want me to cover that in a future video, let me know down below. Call of Duty 1 was a PC exclusive title, and after seeing the success it had, Activision wanted to cash in on some of the console revenue that franchises like Medal of Honor were already doing. Although you think a simple port would do, this was not the case due to console limitations. Enter Call of Duty Finest Hour. This title was outsourced and developed by Spark Unlimited, and saw a similar opening level to the original Call of Duty, but after that you are given a completely different storyline that essentially runs adjacent to the main story for Call of Duty 1, just from a different perspective and experience. And in my opinion is a pretty cool concept that we'll see as a trend throughout the rest of these spin-off titles for the most part. This was released on the GameCube, PS2, and original Xbox, and was marked as the very first console installment in the Call of Duty franchise. If you think this is just some side campaign console spin-off, you're mistaken, because the fun does not stop here. On top of a full-fledged campaign, every version of Finest Hour supported local multiplayer, but then on the Xbox and PS2 versions, you have 32-player online multiplayer support, which is actually insane for a game that came out in 2004 and on console. Really cool to see a spin-off game kind of get the full treatment as a main installment, only in a console reimagining. The only other somewhat true port of the original Call of Duty I can think of is the N-Gage port. I didn't know about the N-Gage, but looking back at it, it's basically Nokia's attempt at a cell phone that also has like built-in gaming capabilities. And well, let's just say it was way too ambitious for the times. It kind of takes a page out of Finest Hour's book where it tweaks some of the major gameplay and missions, but to my understanding, not near as much as Finest Hours did. It seems like a more like just like copy-paste version of Call of Duty 1 with some limitations, obviously. Kind of serves as like an awkward middle ground between the two. Anyways, that's not what makes this so unique. It's the fact that it's not only the first mobile COD running on a handheld, but that handheld is also a cell phone. I mean, I guess this was a pretty cool concept, but I really don't think there were many kids in 2004 begging for a mobile COD experience. I simply think the technology just wasn't there yet. Honestly, probably still isn't there. As we'll see later, this isn't where the handheld spin-offs would stop, but this one definitely stands out the most because of the platform that it was released on. Believe it or not, this was my very first Call of Duty ever. And let me tell you, 8-year-old me had an absolute blast with it. However, I can't spend like too much time without repeating myself, because everything I said about Finest Hour can also be said about Call of Duty Big Red 1, but instead of like the adjacent story to Call of Duty 1, it's an adjacent story to Call of Duty 2. Call of Duty 2 released on the PC and Xbox 360, and since the 360 was brand new, most people didn't have one, let alone a PC either. So in order to let the old generation, which is honestly still the current generation, get their taste, Big Red 1 was created. Differing plenty from the original COD 2 to be its own game, it also had its very own unique multiplayer that was different than the base Call of Duty 2. It's honestly crazy to see last-gen spin-offs get this kind of love and care, because if you play Call of Duty on a last-gen console today, you can just tell they were not developed with that idea in mind. So the idea of full-fledged single titles being developed from the ground up for these old consoles is amazing. Until it wasn't. The next version of Call of Duty on handheld was the Java editions of Call of Duty exclusive to mobile phones. And I'm not talking smartphones, I'm talking like Motorola Razr. And if you remember that, drop a comment, please. You are an absolute OG. These were running on the mobile version of Java that was part of your phone's software by default, and actually had a handful of installments. Call of Duty 1, 2, 3, Modern Warfare, World at War, Modern Warfare 2, and Black Ops all had a mobile Java version that was developed by Glue Mobile. As far as the game themselves, well, it was a top-down, like Dead Ops arcade-like gameplay that I never played, but it must have seen at least a little bit of success considering there's so many installments after the first one. And just like the N-Gage version of Call of Duty, I don't think anyone was really asking for this, but I guess if you were a diehard fan, you probably would buy these each year for just a little extra fun. Again, just overly ambitious. I'm lumping every Wii title on here because I feel like they're different enough and kind of spawned a subgenre of Call of Duty because of how many there were to come. The first was Call of Duty 3 and is also recognized as probably the worst. Some clunky motion controls are present in every single entry, but Call of Duty 3 was the most extra with it. Next was World at War, which had campaign and multiplayer, but no zombies. I remember having World at War for PS3 and went to a friend's house who had it on the Wii, and I was super excited to show him zombies and play with super crazy motion controls, only to learn that it's impossible because this was on the Wii. So one might argue that I found out the really hard way. If you notice, I skipped Call of Duty 4, and that's because it did get released on the Wii, but 2 years after the original release date, which also coincided with the release of Modern Warfare 2. Mind you, Modern Warfare 2 also did not get its very own Wii port. Not sure why they skipped this one. Moving forward to Black Ops 1, which had a Wii version complete with zombies this time, which I remember hearing that the Wii was gonna have zombies, and I thought that was just like a pretty cool upgrade to see it get like a somewhat full release. But then the last title for the Wii would be Modern Warfare 3. After that, we would shift to the Wii U for Black Ops 2 and Ghosts, which I think run pretty decent. I mean, the Wii U wasn't like the worst thing in the world, even though a lot of people would say so. I never had a chance to play these. But I do remember all the Wii titles kind of having like their own little quirks aside from the motion controls. Some campaign missions are tweaked here and there were some small details like the fact you could reload the Thunder Gun and zombies on the Wii version, which you obviously can't do in any other version, so that's kind of like a random fun fact. But anyways, if you want more details about Call of Duty on the Wii, Scott the Woz has an amazing video kind of summarizing the whole concept, which I will definitely link down below. Call of Duty Road to Victory was the first, I guess, legit handheld Call of Duty title that wasn't held back by a mobile phone's limitation. Instead, it was held back by the PSP's limitation. Exclusive to the PSP, Road to Victory was a spin-off of Call of Duty 3 despite coming out a full year later. I did have a chance to play this on a friend's PSP growing up, and even for the times, I thought the controls were terrible. I just think that if you're gonna go mobile, considering that there's no analog or control sticks, the only real workaround to make it feel normal was with some type of touchscreen, and even that isn't necessarily a preferred method. I don't think anyone is mad at this game's existence. It's just Call of Duty trying to appeal to a wider audience. And once again, we have another Call of Duty spin-off with its very own multiplayer, supporting up to 6 players with 9 maps to choose from as well. Just another example of a game being held back by its hardware and not necessarily a bad game or even concept to begin with. So far, and honestly, even the rest of the games on this list, at least like one person out there has probably played each entry. Maybe not a lot of you, but some. But this is one that I would love to hear about people's experience playing, if any of you have played it. And that is Call of Duty 2 Pocket Edition for the Windows Pocket PC. This is a very mysterious title, I'll say, and that's just because there's a little information and even less accessibility for this game. I'll be honest, I don't even know what a Pocket PC is. All I know is that it has a stylus, and I think this is originally designed to be just like an email reader and like internet browser, maybe for people who have like a 9-to-5 job or office job, but in turn has enough computing power to run a spin-off of Call of Duty 2 in 2007. Notice I said spin-off and not port. That's because like most games on this list, this was its very own game that simply borrowed assets from Call of Duty 2. I think you can emulate this game today, but it looks like it runs horrible on the emulator, and from the footage I've seen, it looks way better on like the actual Pocket PC itself. But like I said, there is very limited footage or even information about this, so I don't really know what to say about it. I will say it had its very own online multiplayer, which is crazy to think about. The idea of grown businessmen in the mid-2000s playing Call of Duty online on their Pocket PC is just hilarious, because obviously like that wouldn't exist if people weren't playing on it. And I would love to see if like through emulation and like mods, people would get those servers up and running in like a private match. That would just be crazy to see what that would be like. This next entry sort of falls under the same umbrella as Call of Duty on the Wii, but the DS actually went through an era of getting a Call of Duty spin-off loosely based off of a mainline title. This would span from Call of Duty 4 all the way to Modern Warfare 3, which was nice for DS players. All these titles were developed by N-Space, so they function pretty similarly to each other, just with a different base game as the skeleton. The control scheme revolved around the stylus, which may sound awful and disgusting, but I thought it wasn't all that bad after getting used to it. I definitely enjoyed the stylus method more than the PSP, that's for sure. They all included a multiplayer, and I actually had a good amount of time played on the Call of Duty 4 DS version, specifically the multiplayer thanks to DS Download, which if you know DS Download is, you are also an absolute OG. I'll go ahead and explain it anyways for those who don't know. It basically let you play with someone else who also had a DS but didn't even need to own a copy of the game, which in turn let you wirelessly play the game against each other without any Wi-Fi needed, which is genuinely one of the coolest features about the DS. I remember doing this on Mario Kart just thinking how awesome it was, and the fact that Call of Duty also had it on the DS was wild. Aside from single player and multiplayer, the Black Ops version actually had a zombies mode, and it was completely different than the zombies you're used to. Well, same concept of an onslaught horde mode, but there was 4 unique maps dedicated to the DS version that have never been seen again. These were House, Overlook, Facility, and Temple. Now, these weren't anything crazy. As a matter of fact, I would say they're even simpler than Nocturne Toten. No perks, no pack-a-punch, and not even a single wonder weapon either. But still a really cool gesture to see some form of zombies being implemented into the version, even if it's not that good. Would have been interesting to see them implement Call of Duty titles on the 3DS, since that thing had a decent amount of power for the time. The PS2 is the best-selling console of all time. This meant that in the year 2008, despite the next gen of consoles being a few years old, the PS2 was definitely still very much so alive and well. And Activision didn't want the PS2 owners to feel left out. That's where World at War Final Fronts comes into play. I also had a chance to play this version, but of all the spin-off games, this is probably the most lazy out of all of them. So far, every spin-off on the last gen or handheld aside from the mobile games has had multiplayer, but World at War Final Fronts was only campaign with absolutely nothing else to the game, and not even a long one at that. The graphics are pretty horrific, but I'm usually pretty good about not letting that take me away from the experience, but comparing this to the actual World at War, it is several steps below, and I know that it's not a port of it, it's its own game with its own story, but these games don't even feel or look anything alike in my opinion. This game also felt sort of predatory in a way because it really did look like you were buying the original World at War like you would on the Xbox 360 or PS3, but that couldn't be further from the truth. A fun fact about this game was it actually got a T rating instead of M because of how awful the graphics were. You couldn't really create a graphic experience, no pun intended. I totally understand why this came out. I mean, this wasn't even close to being the last game released on the PlayStation 2, but I feel like a re-release of the original Call of Duty 2 or Call of Duty 3 would have been a little more appropriate for the hardware. Probably one of the more beloved entries on this list, World at War Zombies was released in 2009 for iOS and was actually one of the greatest mobile games at the time. I'm pretty sure this topped the App Store for like several years. I'm not even joking. I remember playing this on my iPod Touch on the way to school like every day. At first, all it had was Nocturne and Toten, but every single World at War map was available later in its life cycle for an extra like $5 per map, I'm pretty sure, which was an easy decision for 11-year-old me. And unlike World at War on the DS, these games were the exact same maps from the actual game and even included perks and Pack-a-Punch just like we had in Dur Riese. We later got the Black Ops version of Zombies as a separate experience and some might see as like a downgrade. All the maps were included for one price, which were Kino, Ascension, and an alternate version of Call of the Dead where you play as the original Zombies crew, which is like totally random, and was also available on Android as well. This version saw a downturn in stability once iOS 8 dropped, like the game's performance and everything just kind of like totally collapsed. I don't even know how to explain it. Also, since the game included all the maps for a one-time purchase of $15, they decided to throw in microtransactions to be able to buy doors and perks for real-life money if you didn't have enough points in the game at that moment. So some might argue that the pay-to-win days of Call of Duty started way earlier than supply drops in Advanced Warfare. Black Ops Zombies Mobile kind of ruined the charm of the World at War experience that was already loved, and it seems I may have gotten lucky by skipping the Black Ops Zombies Mobile experience because I only played the World at War version. But overall, to me, this was a pretty solid breakthrough in the mobile gaming scene as far as gameplay went. I feel like the touchscreen FPS subgenre of gaming didn't really exist during this time, so in some weird way, World at War Zombies paved the way for what COD Mobile is today, even if Black Ops Zombies Mobile ended on a sour note. We are officially on the last handheld console on this list, being Black Ops Declassified. I once again had the chance to play this game due to a friend who owned a PS Vita. By the way, I kind of totally forgot that PS Vitas were a thing. Anyways, this as the name gives away, took assets from Black Ops 1 and created a spin-off game that actually had a very different structure than any campaign in Call of Duty history. It's basically like Spec Ops from Modern Warfare 2, but that's like the entire game. And look, I love Spec Ops, but if that took the place of a campaign in a Call of Duty title, I'd be pretty disappointed. The result on Declassified is a 45-minute snooze fest with extremely repetitive gameplay. But I will say this game had multiplayer and I thought it was actually pretty decent. Supporting online and give you like at least a mid experience at the absolute worst. This is what I had the most experience to play on, and though my time was limited, I did enjoy it. Also, another plus to this game was the graphics. I think this is probably like the best example of like good graphics on a Call of Duty handheld experience, so I'll definitely give them credit for that. Here's another one that I bet a lot of you never got to play. Call of Duty Online was developed by Raven Software Shanghai and was a Chinese exclusive free-to-play version of Call of Duty that is actually one of the coolest and ambitious concepts at the time. I remembered when this was announced in I think 2012, and I was super jealous that a free-to-play live service model of Call of Duty taking elements from all Call of Duties was launching exclusively in China. All the fan favorite guns, maps, and modes in one free download was way ahead of its time, but obviously none of us got to experience this because of the region connection lock. Now, there was a way around this with the use of a VPN and other software, but your ping would be in like the several hundreds because you're playing off of a Chinese server. Also, everything is in Mandarin, I'm pretty sure. Anyways, this would eventually shut down in 2021 and would basically act as the blueprint for what Call of Duty Mobile would be, which, by the way, I'm not mentioning COD Mobile or Warzone Mobile on here because they're basically mainline entries at this point. Anyways, I really wish I had the chance to play Call of Duty Online at its peak because this project was just way ahead of its time. Call of Duty Strike Team is a mobile game that I never knew about. Taking place inside the Black Ops 2 universe or like a tie-in game, it was a hybrid between a top-down tactical game but also let the player switch to first-person mode at any given moment, giving you multiple angles of play. This is where things became an obvious cash grab because this just looks very unfun. I think if you're gonna make a mobile game like this, you should probably just stick to one gameplay style instead of trying to be extra like this. It's now off of the App Store, and based off of the reviews, it seems like we didn't really miss out on anything here. Clash of Clans was, and probably still is, one of the biggest mobile games to ever hit the marketplace. With a free-to-play template, people didn't mind shoveling a couple extra bucks to enhance their experience, and some didn't mind shoving a lot of extra bucks. So Activision wanted to get a piece of the pie as well, and that's where Call of Duty Heroes comes in. I'm gonna assume that you guys know how these games work, so I'm just gonna let the gameplay speak for itself. It's one of those games that lets you just grind and you could have a squad of friends, be like ranked in leaderboards, blah, 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 you know. But I mean, it was really cool. I know there's like kill streaks in it when you're attacking another person's base, and it looks pretty like true to the original Predator missile. So I mean, there is some charm to it looks like. And apparently there were a lot of people who were like really disappointed when the servers got cut off. So please let me know your experience down below if you ever played this. Another region lock game that's also a mobile game is Call of Duty Siege. Exclusive to Australia for whatever reason, this was Call of Duty's attempt at a real-time strategy game set in the Infinite Warfare universe. Now, Call of Duty was going through a lot of heat at the time, and since Call of Duty isn't exactly known for their RTS gameplay, this is the last thing that needed to be seen by the public to avoid any further criticism. So Australia was as far as this game made it. As far as if it was good or not, well, I don't have much to say. You look at the gameplay and like nothing about this screams Call of Duty, but maybe if you're into RTS games, it could maybe scratch that itch in a good way. But I never got a chance to play this because, as you can tell by my accent, I'm as American as it gets. And finally, to round off this list, we have Call of Duty Infinite Warfare Jackal Assault. So maybe you could technically lump this game as a DLC for Infinite Warfare, but I'm pretty sure it stands on its own. It's a PlayStation 4 VR exclusive that, like most VR games at the time, acted as a tech demo. It's a spaceship dogfight game that I think only had one mission, if I'm not mistaken. I never had a PS4, let alone the VR headset as well, but it honestly looks pretty fun, and I'm sure did a decent job showcasing what the headset was capable of. Also, it was free, so if you have the headset or have played it, someone please tell me how it was because it looks pretty decent for being released in 2016. And for some reason, I'm kind of leaning towards that this was better than the actual game itself. But those are the forgotten Call of Duty spin-offs you never played. Let me know which of these you didn't know about, or if you played any of these, I would love to know your all's experience with those down below. Also, if you want me to play these in a separate video, like for each entry, go ahead and let me know down below. I know that's something I would enjoy. I don't know if you guys would though. Anyways, if you want to hear me talk about the entire history of celebrities in Call of Duty, click on screen now. Join my Discord if you're feeling crazy, and if you liked, leave a like. If you didn't, leave a dislike, and thank you so much for watching.